Congratulations on the purchase of your new frame. This series covers the loading of the Gallery2 frame and the Studio2 frame. The two different loading systems is the clear view load and the standard load. Now the differences you'll see today, I'm standing in front of the Gallery2 frame, but we also will show the Studio2 frame, and when we show the loading it will actually be on the Studio2 frame. The difference is the poles are larger on the Gallery2 frame and the throat space is deeper on the Gallery2 frame. The loading is exactly the same, so enjoy, get that quilt loaded, and let's start quilting. With the standard load system, make sure that this piece here is level or horizontal along the bottom so that you've got both of your your backing pole and your top pole up. Now that your frame is set up properly, we need to add the leaders to the poles. So the first thing is get you a Sharpie marker, a permanent marker, and you want to measure your poles and find the center point and place a mark on the pole, on all three poles. You don't need to do it with your idler pole, but you do need to do it on all three poles. So you find that center mark, and this is set up as an 8-foot frame, and so that was just a natural mark just where the seams of the pole are. But on your 10 or your 12-foot, you'll need to mark it right by your Velcro. So you'll put your Velcro on and then you'll place a center mark. Then you'll take your leaders and you'll do the same thing. Fold them in half and then mark on your leaders, and you can see right here the mark on both sides. So on the other side is another mark. All three leaders, find the center and mark them as well. Sharpie pen works really well for that. Then place them on your poles. So how do you place them? So what you're going to do is on your back pole and your top pole, the ones closest to your belly or your body, you're going to place those leaders so that they waterfall down into the center. So they go right down into the center. So that goes this way and that goes in that way. On your back pole, where your take-up leader, this is your take-up pole, you're going to load your leader so that it loads on the back of the pole away from you. So it falls back down behind the pole and behind the idler pole. Now we're set up with that, okay? The next thing is to prepare your backing, your batting, and so that it will be the right size for your quilt top. Now your batting and your backing needs to be 2 to 4 inches or even 6 inches wider than the quilt top and longer as well, so that you don't have any surprises as you go down your quilt and end up with not enough backing fabric. So you want to make sure that that's 2 to 4 inches or 6 inches longer and wider. Okay, the next thing that I do is I like to find my center point of the top, the part that I'm going to load to the leaders. I want to find my center to that. Remember we found the center to the leaders? We're going to now find the center to the quilt. And so I fold it in half, I find that center, and I place a pin. I prefer to place a safety pin because it doesn't fall out when I'm kind of moving my fabric around, rather than a straight pin. You can do what you want, but I really do like that safety pin. It's in there, it's a safety for me. So I do that to the top of the quilt top, and I do it to the bottom of the quilt top. Fold it in half, place your safety pin in, and now that we know where that halfway is. The same with my backing. Fold them in half. This is the edges that I'm going to be pinning to the leaders. So safety pins on each one of those. I don't need to do that with my batting. I'm not worried about that. But the other thing that I do like to do as I prepare my backing is I prepare it in a way that if I have to seam my backing, my seam, which is right here, will be going horizontal with my poles. So there's no buildup of fullness. If I were to run it this way, I run it this way and it just rolls on and doesn't add bulk to the backing as I roll it on. All right, I have my backing now. I'm going to go ahead and take that and throw it over the poles. I prefer to throw it over rather than let it hang down here as I pin it. And the reason I do that is really an obvious reason, because sometimes we get confused. There, I've thrown it over the back of the take-up pole. And then when I open this up, I have the wrong side facing the sky. I have the right side facing the floor, meaning that's the back side of my quilt when it's finished. So it's a visual for me to know that always the back side, the right side of the quilt is down, so that it will be outside and not inside of the quilt. So I just kind of throw this over there and even just bring this along here. And then I bring my first leader. This is the back and the backing pole, okay? We're going to start with the pole closest to our body. And this is the pole with the leader. And we want to find the center and the center of the fabric. So we want to find those two marks, and then I need to pin that. I want to pin those two together so I know that that's the center of both. And then from there I can go ahead and take out that safety pin. I'm finished with that and could go ahead and put it in my pin cushion. Put it in your pin cushion so you don't lose it, okay? Don't want that sewn in the quilt. Then I need to start pinning, and I'm going to pin from the center to the right, and then I'm going to pin from the center to the left. So as I pin, I'm going to place my pins, and I have the long Handi Quilter pins. I'm going to place them so that they don't overlap at all, because overlapping means I have to put too many pins in or more pins. It takes time. Then I don't get to quilt as fast. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of point to end. Doesn't need to be any closer than that. And pin that across. And that's a crooked pin, but let's just straighten it out. All the way across on this leader. As I've placed my pins in across the edge, I make sure that my pins are less than 1/4 inch, or at least no more than 1/4 inch against the edge, the raw edge. Because if I pin inside more, then it takes up a little, makes things uneven on my fabric. So about 1/4 inch in, catching both sides, and then on the last pin on each side, I actually weave this one. So I've got it started. Rather than take a big bite like I've done on my others, you don't need to weave the others, just put one big bite in there. But on this last one, this gives me a little bit more security. So I just weave that in like that, and that works really well. Okay, actually on the other side, quilters like to actually take the pin and turn it so that it's weaving in, so there's no pin on the edge to stick your hand. So it's a really good idea. Okay, so I've got both sides from the front, from the center to the right and from the center to the left, all pinned. Now I'm going to go ahead and smooth out my leader to make sure that I have the good tension all the way across. Make sure my fabric is smoothed out and that there's no stray threads that are going to be quilted inside of the quilt. Because if it's, just don't want those stray threads. So we want to place those in our trash, and then make sure it's all really nice and smooth as we start to roll. Now, really important thing, we're going over here to the ratchets. I have 3 ratchets with my Duo load system. Now, a really important thing is to come over here to these ratchets, and you want to place the ratchet down so that it clicks into the sprocket here. And when it does that, I can't roll it backwards. I can only roll it the right way. So it will start, I can start rolling that. See, it won't allow me to roll it the wrong way. So as I roll this, all right, so I'm going to go ahead and start to roll it, and I want to make sure that my leaders are rolling, and as I get it rolled onto the leader here, I can see that those pins are totally totally horizontal. And if they aren't, then I'm going to make some adjustment, because you can't have a square quilt at the end if you don't keep things square as you go. Okay, I'm going to continue to roll this, and as I do, making sure there's no threads and making sure that the fabric doesn't hourglass in. So fabric sometimes has a tendency to start bunching in here. I want to make sure that I, by myself, do this, because if I had a helper, that helper may have different tension on their hands, and this might be rolled tighter than this side. So do this by yourself. It works really well. So I'm going to just go ahead and just make sure that everything is rolled and kind of adjusted out. See how nice and smooth that's rolling? Now I can see my seam coming, and I have this seam here. It's actually where the selvage was cut off and then pressed open. Okay, you don't want to have your selvage here, because that's a tight part of fabric, and it may have a tendency to draw in when you wash your quilts. Okay, check your sides every once in a while. This is going really well, looking good. It's coming down, so it's looking pretty smooth. I must have even tension on both hands. Okay, as it gets to here, if it's warped, if it's kind of wavy, right along here, check it, and I can see that it looks like it's running smooth all the way across. But if it is a little crooked, you can take that tension out by just adjusting it with your hands. And if you feel like you're not wrapping it tight enough, you can actually adjust that and get it a little tighter on your pole if you want. So, but that looks really good. I'm good, happy with that. Gonna make sure that rolls flat down there. And we'll continue, adjust it. If it starts to pull, there we go, we got that. Want to make sure those raw edges are together. And then as I come along here, keep adjusting that, making sure there's no stray threads inside. Keeping that tension. Okay, as I see this is coming, it's looking pretty, this has a little bit of a extra, so I think that means that I'm straightening that up. I want it all to be the same on the same horizontal line as I go across here, which it looks like it did it, but I had a little draw in there, so I'm going to slide that out, and it's set. Okay, now let's load the top. Okay, I have my quilt top, and this is a directional one. I want my arrows or my triangles to be pointing forward, so this is going to be the top of the quilt, so I'm going to go ahead and throw it over the frame. The same thing I did with the back of the quilt. I know I'm orienting this so that when it's finished, this is what I see, the top of the quilt. So when I do lay it over and open it up, because I want the top to be open to the sky, okay, then the next thing I do is I'm going to find my center, and then I'm going to find my center leader. And I don't want to bring my center leader here. I want to bring it up through here, okay? Find the center of the quilt, that safety pin that I put in earlier, and with my straight pin, I'm going to pin, we'll get some pins here. I'm actually going to pin the wrong side of the quilt top to the right side of the leader. Okay, so I'm going to get those together, place that first pin in, and then take out my safety pin, because I won't need that now. So I'm going to go ahead and readjust that pin, make it a little longer bite. I didn't adjust the fabric or shift it. Now, something that I really like to do, and I'm going to go ahead and put my pin cushion there, that I really like to do is I actually like to advance I'm going to put my ratchet down, and I like to roll my leader up a little bit onto my pole. Straighten out the leader so that it's being rolled properly. Straight along here. I'm going to roll it up so that it's actually sitting right on top of my backing pole. Now what I want to do is I want to take a tape measure, and there, I got this all wound up here. I want to take a tape measure, and this is a centering tape measure, so when I go to the center of it, I can find my 0, and it counts out this way, and then it counts out this way. And so when I place this on here, I want to have measured the quilt, and there's the center of my quilt. I'm actually going to measure it out here, and it tells me that it's 33 inches. So I want this to be 33 inches as well. I don't want this to be pulled as I pin it. So if I were to take this and measure it, wait, let's put it in the center. It might not be 33 inches. We didn't center that. It is actually 31. So that would have been a bad mistake. So I'm going to go ahead and place a pin over here, knowing that I have this where I want it on this side, and then I can go ahead again and find the center and move this over to this side to 31 inches. So that's a little off, so I may have to do an adjustment, or there's my 31 inches. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pin that. And there still may be some fullness in there, so I need to kind of work with that. But I can see that that looks good there, and that is good over here. And then I can place my pins all the way along this using my hand. Place your hand right here, and then place a pin in. I'm going to actually move that pin to this side. I like to pin on the top of the quilt. And you might find that you have a different technique, but I've really, really liked the way to do this. My hand rests on there, and I can bring that up, and maybe you might place your pins sporadic along here, kind of every few inches, and then come back and fill in. All right, I finished pinning. I pinned from the center to the right side, from the center to the left side. Everything fit in. There's just perfect 31 inches from the center to this side, 31 from the center to this side. So I know that I haven't stretched one side or the other as I've pinned it. Now I'm going to go ahead and just let that down, and again drop the ratchet down so that it will only roll the right way. So it's dropped because I can't roll it back towards me. It will only roll forward, and that is the correct way. So as I advance the quilt, I look as I advance, and I can see that there are some threads that are kind of poking up here. So I'm going to go ahead and maybe as I roll, clip those threads. So that's something that I would encourage you to do, is to clean it up and check to make sure there's no long, dark colored threads on the back as well that's going to show through, like on this white quilt. I don't want a purple thread showing through. So check that, and I'm going to go ahead and continue rolling, and you can see there it's starting to fold over there just like it right. Now, the quilt top has guidelines. It has rows. Normally a quilt top has guidelines. It has rows that you can use to keep the quilt straight as it rolls onto the pole. okay? And it gives me stability. I really like pinning my quilt top to the pole. Okay, as we're going along here, here's my first seam. I can see that everything is the way it should be. If I've got any stray purple or green threads, I can actually trim them or fold them back into the darker thread. Usually you'd want to trim those. Okay, as I roll again, the same thing. You want to load this yourself, not your friend help you, so that you get that tension right. As I come around, I'm getting my next row, and it's going right across the top. If you're seeing any thing that needs to be fixed, then just adjust it. And if it feels like it's rolling too loosely and you want it a little tighter, then you can just add a little tension to that just with your hands across. Make sure your seams are folded the right direction that you want them to be. Again, here comes my next seam, and I'm seeing a little of the fabric start to bunch, so I'm going to do a little bit of adjusting and sliding it, because it was sliding in on my edge. I want that edge to be straight because my quilt is actually really straight, so I want to keep it straight. Here's my next one. By loading the top to your pole, I know a lot of quilters like to float their top and just let it hang, but I really like the security that it has, or the stability that it has as it's being loaded, so that I know that I'm seeing any issues. There's a thread there that I need to get rid of. Place it in my trash. Some threads. Make sure that you really check the back of this quilt and take care of any of those issues. Your seams are going the right way, that you had pressed them that way. Getting that loaded properly will give you a better experience in quilting. See how I'm taking the extra fullness out, giving it a good firm. There we go. Here's our next seam. I want those to be totally horizontal with my poles as I go across. My last one, as I come to the edge, check it again, make sure that everything is smooth on each edge and not hourglassing in. There's my center pin. That's where I know I'm going to the center of the leader when I'm finished, when I'm ready to go. So this gives me lots of cues that I can make sure these seams that are going vertical, I can make sure they're on top of each other and nothing is starting to wave back and forth. Gives me a better quilt in the end. Everything's squared up. Okay, now it's time to take our backing fabric and bring it forward to the take-up pole. Now this fabric has pulled over. We need to push it back, throw it back over. It needs to be on the back of the idler pole, and that's where we're going to start pinning. So I'm going to release the ratchet from my backing so that I can have the fabric roll down. We'll roll this back up. And we're going to find the center of my backing and remove any stray threads. Find the center of the backing and the center of the leader, and it's been marked, and I'm going to place those together. Now what I want to do is check to make sure that they really are right, that I'm not skewing this so that maybe this is twisted. You can see how I've twisted that. You want to make sure, and if sometimes you find even though they're both centered that there's a little skew and you may have to adjust it just a little bit. You want to make sure that you don't distort the fabric. So we're going to bring that up there, and that's pretty close to that pin. and pin that in place. Now this is one where I pin my pin to the fabric side, not the leader side, because to me that's a little awkward. So I bring up those edges and I pin it to the fabric side. Point to point or point to end. I can go ahead and I can take out my pin if I want, because we don't need it, and then I pin across just as I did the others. Okay, we've pinned the backing fabric to the take-up leader, which is on the take-up pole, and now it's time to place our batting in between so that we can we're making a sandwich here of the backing, the batting, and the top. So I like to I'm going to go ahead and tension this back up, and I bring it close to me. So rather than advancing everything forward so that my pins are up next to the poles, I bring it down closer to me. I can reach it there. I have more control of getting things set up when it's closer to me. When I'm ready to quilt, I may want to move it. If I'm using a Pro Stitcher, I may want to move it up further. But right now, I'm working with this edge, and I need it close to me. So I've got my batting, and I'm going to take my top pole and place it in the pole cradles on both sides, because otherwise it's kind of hard to get that batting in between those poles. So I'm going to go ahead and place it there. So it raises it up, and then I can take my batting and make sure that I've got all those threads off again, and open that up. But you see it's folded. I don't want it folded. I want one edge. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that up to the top. And I want to check to make sure that I've got enough batting so that it is 2 or 3 inches longer or wider than my top on this side and the top on this side. If I have to adjust my batting, I can do that. I like to place my batting edge, the edge of my batting, right up against those pins that I can see. And smooth that across, take out any dark threads, because they are definitely going to show on this quilt. There's a dark thread there right in it. Take those out. Don't throw them on the floor like I just did. Put them in a trash, because if you throw them on the floor, they'll come up into the batting. Murphy's Law there, okay? Smooth that out all the way along, and I like a nice straight edge along there. That is smooth. And then I'm going to actually unroll this a couple of times and let it lay down there. And I can see that I've got a good edge there. Place my bat poles back into the cradle or into the side arms. So I must have placed this wrong. There we go. They're back the way they should be. And then I can go ahead and roll this a little bit. And I like to roll it about 1 inch below the top. And then using my machine, I will create a channel lock, stitch a channel lock across the top, a horizontal channel lock, either using my Pro Stitcher or using the channel locks that go on the wheels, or if you have the electromagnetic channel lock, you can use that. Do that horizontal channel lock across. That is my guide. I want it tensioned properly before I do that. So if I do that, I need to make sure that this ratchet's down and this ratchet here is down. I don't need to worry about the top ratchet right now, but I want to make sure that I have the correct tension, and then do that horizontal stitch across the top. And once I get that stitched, I can bring the top of my quilt top up to that edge and find the center, place it on the center, making sure everything is centered, and then stitch a stitch line about less than 1/4 inch inside of the edge, so that you don't want to quilt into your quilt. You have to take that out when you start to bind it. So stitch that and also stitch down your throat space. Okay, once I've attached that to the top, I can go ahead and advance the quilt, release these two ratchets on this side. Using my hand wheel, I can roll that forward and it's all attached. This would have been pinned or stitched as well. They will all advance at the same time together, and then baste down your sides. Keep your side clamps on when you're quilting, and you're good to go. Happy quilting!